Hello. Today's video is going to focus on the theme of gender, masculinity and femininity, and the video is going to think about how these concepts apply to Shakespeare's gore-drenched tragedy, Macbeth. If you've ever seen my videos before, you know the drill. There'll be 3 episodes or incidents from this play that tie to the theme of gender. And once we've looked at that, I'll roll out a jazzy exam response, the like of which is going to steam up the examiner's bifocals with its quality of analysis and delivery. One of the first times in the play that the theme of gender rears its hefty head is in Act 1, when Lady Macbeth is asking those evil spirits to unsex her, to eject or reject her feminine qualities so that she's better able to kill King Duncan. And her logic here appears to be that getting rid of her softer emotions, such as mercy and compassion, which are perceived as feminine here, that will enable her to summon sufficient helpings of manly qualities, such as ruthlessness and bravery, to do the grisly deed and kill off Duncan. Now, of course, to 21st century ears, this sounds ridiculous. Most people now appreciate that whether you're a right rollicking toughie or not has nothing to do with your gender. The only people going to question that are going to be really hairy-knuckled Neanderthal types. So what this line reveals then is the depressing, patriarchal nature, that means the male-dominated nature, of Jacobean society. We're seeing weaker characteristics or qualities or personality traits coded or perceived as feminine here. That theme of gender gets rolled out in Act 1, Scene 2, when the captain is telling Duncan about what a hero Macbeth has been in battle. And Duncan's response to this news highlights a link between masculinity and brutality. It gives us, the audience, an insight into what is perceived as manly or masculine in this society. And I'd be lying if I said it was the word I would have chosen, because when Duncan hears that Macbeth chopped a traitor's head off, Duncan says, "Oh, worthy gentleman." And you could be forgiven for thinking it a little ironic that a man that goes around decapitating people is described as a gentleman, a name which is rich in connotations of civility and well-mannered behaviour. But another connotation of gentleman is the idea of a man of high status, and that's what's significant here, because what this scene conveys very powerfully to the audience is the idea that your performance on the battlefield, how brutal and violent you are, that determines your status as a man. Manhood is determined by displays of violence, obviously in the service of your king. And we can chuck in a relevant contextual detail here, because this scene comes across as great PR for James I, Shakespeare's patron. You can imagine he'd watch this, he would walk away with a whacking great grin slapped across his face, because the message that resonates in this scene is overpowering. It is a noble thing to do to serve your king in battle. And one of the reasons James would have been so happy at that kind of message being peddled to his public is because it would reduce his own anxieties about regicide, about people trying to do him in. Don't forget that only a couple of months before, he'd narrowly survived getting blown to bits by Guy Fawkes in the Gunpowder Plot. But hold on a second. We can offer up that examiner another interpretation for this line, "a worthy gentleman." A bit like tossing a fish to a sea lion, we can give the examiner something extra, which can only optimise our chances of the highest grades. Because Duncan's response to Macbeth's psychotic, violent, heroic behaviour on the battlefield, call it what you will, worthy gentleman, that can be interpreted as Duncan actually ushering in his own destruction. Because what he's doing here is he's encouraging his men to link masculinity to bloodshed. And maybe that is conditioning these men to use violence as a means of boosting their status. In a sense, you can see Duncan as having sharpened the murderer's knife, because he's teaching Macbeth that to accrue power, you must demonstrate violence. You must use violence as a means of securing status. So we've seen Duncan clearly entrench here, clearly reinforce the concept of masculinity and violence being very tightly linked together. But jump to Act 4, when Macduff is notified that his family's been massacred by Macbeth. Macduff's response undermines or challenges Duncan's ideas about masculinity. So it links to that theme of gender. What am I honking on about? Stay tuned. Well, as you can imagine, when Macduff hears that his whole family's been wiped out, the man's devastated. He keeps saying, what, all my pretty ones, all my pretty ones. He can't get his head around it, and of course he's plunged into deep grief. Unfortunately, Malcolm, who is Duncan's son, basically displays a masterclass in sensitivity by effectively telling Macduff to get over it. You know, he says to take it like a man, focusing on revenge, not remorse. Macduff, however, says that as well as avenging their death like a man, he says he must also feel it as a man. And this response reveals a far more enlightened view towards masculinity than the ones posited by Duncan or Macbeth or Malcolm or even Lady Macbeth. Because what it's doing, it's saying that you can combine strength with displays of softer emotions like grief, and that doesn't compromise your sense of masculinity. It doesn't make you less of a man that you grieve publicly for the death of your loved ones. Manhood here, then, is not just about battering heads in battle. You know, you can demonstrate love and grief, and you can vent emotions without cracking somebody's skull open. Right, model paragraphs. If you've seen any of my videos before, you know the drill by now. I lay on a top level exam response, and then I examine it and deconstruct it to explain how it hits those highest marks, how it achieves the highest criteria of the mark schemes. The question here would be something like, explore the way the theme of gender is presented in Macbeth, which accords with the Part B question of the EdXL exam spec, but I dare say links to all sorts of exam boards that you might be studying. Here we go then. The question again, explore the way the theme of gender is presented in Macbeth. In Act 4, Macduff's response to the death of his family engaged with the theme of gender. And what I've done here is I've cited the act where this theme appears, and of course I've woven in that key phrase, theme of gender, so the examiner knows I'm responding to his question. I'm not honking on myself like some mad old man. And after making that initial point in the first line, I now need to back up or support or substantiate that point with some evidence, a quotation or a reference to the text. Here we are. When Malcolm tells Macduff to seek revenge, Macduff agrees but adds that he will feel it like a man. Notice this is not a massive quotation. Even if it's a closed book exam, they don't expect you to recall whacking great reams and tracks of the play. Less is more. Go for quality responses that you can do a lot with. Here we've got a small one, feel it like a man. And on to the explanation, which I'll read and then examine. This implies that Macduff's depiction of manhood challenges the limited, simply aggressive presentation of masculinity promoted by Duncan's dynasty. Macduff does not feel that displays of softer emotions such as grief diminish his identity as a man. So I've used the verb implies. I could use highlights or conveys or suggests or telegraphs. This is just to launch my explanation. And that explanation is that evidence shows that Macduff's presentation of manhood is different to Duncan's. I said Duncan's dynasty purely because I think it sounds a little bit more la-di-da than Duncan's family. And of course I want to adopt a formal tone to engage the ear of the examiner. I've then developed that point just to explain that Macduff's displays of softer emotions like grief don't affect or reduce or diminish his sense of masculinity, his sense of being a man. Once I'm done with the thematic analysis there, the thematic interpretation, notice there's no analysis of language and structure, it's not that kind of question, then I'm bouncing on to some relevant contextual details. Here we are. Perhaps the original Jacobean audience would find it exhilarating to see such enlightened ideas about masculinity on stage, ideas that defied the fixed gender roles controlling their own lives. Notice that this is relevant contextual detail. I'm not just tossing in Shakespeare's date of birth for poops and giggles. This has a clear link to what I'm talking about, the idea that displays of masculinity that take in this softer side, that will be different to what Shakespeare's original Jacobean audience will be used to seeing. A very brief detour here, folks, to remind you that as we tick down to the exam season, this is the book for you, for anybody wanting a short, sweet, quick win to boost their writing skills. And when you do buy it, you'd want to make sure that your shoelaces are done up nice and tight, because this stuff could knock your socks off. 24 karat revision gold. Sorry about that, folks. Where were we? Oh yeah, fantastic. Conclusions. We're at the finish line now. If you're sick to the thorax of my nasal blethering, then you can read this unaccompanied by sound. Enjoy. It just sums up everything I've honked on about for the last 10 minutes. And there we have it, folks. Some top spec analysis of the theme of gender in Macbeth. If you wanted other episodes or events in the play that link to this prominent theme, you could look in Act 1, where Lady Macbeth is questioning Macbeth's manhood as a means of securing his compliance in committing the regicide. You could even leap to Act 3, where Macbeth is pulling a similar trick. He's talking to the two rentagoons, the two murderers he's trying to commission to kill Banquo, and he starts to challenge and question their manhood as a means of securing compliance in the murder. Any road, that's quite enough brain food for one sitting. Until next time, as they say in Japan, sayonara.